I've spent a good chunk of this year, like many years past, learning as much as I can about how to write better stories. As a guy who first fell in love with art and not really writing, it's only now in the last 5 years that I've begun to see the whole storytelling picture, so to speak. It's like, what's the interplay really between narrative and visuals? Like, why are certain things way more memorable than others? As I'm learning this year, I'm also watching a bunch of entertainment, like every other American. And with that in mind, these are my favorite stories from across the entertainment sphere in 2024. Quick disclaimer, these are not necessarily IPs that have been released in 2024, but just ones that I've personally discovered and sunk my teeth into this year. Before we start, I just want to say that these are also my personal opinions, and even though there's really a science to how to write for the general audiences, on an individual level it's very subjective, and so just keep that in mind. Without further delay, let's get to it.
What is a sword? It is a line.
Blue-Eyed Samurai is a story of an outcast swordsman, a samurai in feudalistic Japan. It's pretty much a straightforward revenge story, and it dabbles into like themes of acceptance as well. The execution and the presentation are so high on a bar. It's such top-tier stuff that comparing it to other shows in recent memory is like a no-brainer pinnacle. It's S tier, I think. Each episode is kind of centered around a set piece or this novel gimmick, I would say, that frames the story. For example, one episode is framed around theatrical type of centerpiece where aristocrats are watching a play, and then different scenes of the play are kind of being told during the play, but also being told in and during the story of Blue-Eyed Samurai. So spoiler alert here, guys. Blue-Eyed Samurai centers around a blue-eyed samurai, and the blue eyes, it's the one big lie, one big twist. I say one big lie because of a podcast I watch. Shout out Chris Oatley. But a blue-eyed person in Japan was looked down upon and kind of discriminated as like a monster or some sort of demon-infused person that didn't really belong in society. And so the main character is on this revenge path mostly because of this station they've been placed in life, like just angry that they were born this way. I've been studying what really makes a good structured story work, and when you look at Blue-Eyed Samurai, each episode is very well edited. It's trimmed of all the fat, so to speak, as they say. You know, like every scene is so grave and so influential to the next scene that you cannot help but be glued to the screen. Now, not only that, but there are very, very good animated scenes here. There are a ton that are just like in your face. The stakes are so high. There's a couple where like the main character is ambushed by a whole army, and in every episode there's like an insurmountable thing that has to be gotten through, whether not knowing where to go or being backed into a corner. There's always something that's seemingly insurmountable about the story, and good writing is throwing the stakes and the conflicts to the next level. Like, the character must develop. Like, the character must grow to get through it. It's impossible to get through the conflict without growing. And so that's something that I think Blue-Eyed Samurai does extremely well. I do have a couple setbacks. We'll just leave it here. The way of motivations, the characters have, I don't know, I thought the whole birth revenge story is a little bit a stretch for me. I think, to me, there needed to be something visually in the way. And you'll understand in the second episode, you'll see that like the motivation for the character is a little bit ethereal. Like, they don't know what exactly they're looking for. And to me, that's kind of bad storytelling in a way. Like, it should be visual. Even though they try to do that with like some imagery. I think it could have been better. Next up is how the hero kind of has to go through this gauntlet of like traps and challenges at this one part in the story. And for the most part, this story is very grounded. Like, the characters all have to do things that are believable, things that like nobody's flying, this is not Chow Yun-Fat in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. They're doing some normalish stuff, you know what I mean, within reason, like, because they are master swordsmen and master fighters, like doing pretty incredible feats. However, they're not doing superhuman stuff, except for this one thing. There's, I'd argue, like an impossibility has been overcome in one of these scenes, and it kind of threw everything off. It's like it's a blemish on the show that kind of affected me, and it didn't take me away from not wanting to watch the rest of the show. It was that good, but it made me step back and think, okay, maybe everything in the show needs to be analyzed just a little bit. Whereas if that wasn't there, I would have just taken this thing as like an ultimate classic like Avatar or something and just left it as is. Alright guys, next up, in the world of comics and manga, we have Witch Hat Atelier. So, Witch Hat Atelier is a manga about a girl who wants to do magic, but in this world can't. It's not how the world works. And only after like a tragic accident with her family does she kind of fall into being accepted as a magician's apprentice. And then really finding out what the truth is about how magic works in the world. And it's totally not what you think. It's like, let me tell you, this is I would say, kind of the most creative way that I've seen a magic system done, especially for this medium. And you'll see why. I'm not going to spoil any of that. That's something that's a huge hook for the book. Pick it up if you want. The book has been out for, the series has started in 2016, I believe. It's been a long time coming, so like 8 years ago, and I'm just not getting into it. I watched some video, maybe bring it up on screen, and it kind of was the first time I saw anything about it. Somebody was really critiquing the art, which I really like doing. Here's the thing about the book, like it's such a pristine story and just so well paced that, let me just say, I'm like, as a dude, opening up a girly, cozy Magic Academy comic book, manga, that makes me kind of hesitant. I'm like, is generally not my thing. I'm reading Berserk or, like Batman or some shit like that. Here I have a little bit of hesitation because I'm not sure if I'm going to be into the subject matter. This tells you how good and flawless the execution of the story is. I think this book can sell anybody. Let me just say, the art in this book is so extraordinary, and I say that word not lightly here. It is so beyond better than most books that, like, it's not even funny. The art, it's almost as if the material of the magical story can only be done in this style. It's almost like the magic itself is how it's drawn. What I'm pulling from Witch Hat Atelier is that it's really one part world building and the magic building aspect, but one part character growth and like this really in-depth character motivation of this girl that has this longing to become and, just wanting to belong with who she's around. And with that, like, the story just works. That's mostly because a lot of these cozy style stories, like, sometimes put the conflicts to the second or third tier down. Like, it's really not much about the conflict. It's more character growth. But the plot here is also very, very strong. The design of the characters are very, very strong. But yeah, grade A, top tier, some of the best manga I've ever read.
You think you have the strength to protect the weak?
Next up is in the realm of video games. And if you guys don't know, I am an avid gamer. Have been for a long, long time, since I was a kid. And it has affected my art and what I think about stories and the rest of it. But I think I'll talk about that in another video. For now, before we get into my game of the year, we'll say, please like and subscribe. There's a lot of people out there that are not subscribed, checking out my channel for the first time. Just hit the button. So, Metaphor ReFantasio is my pick for story of this year in the realm of video games. This is an RPG that has like a lot of fresh ideas and motifs that are kind of bolted on to this grand adventure trope that we've seen a million times. It's essentially a boy trying to save a prince and the kingdom, and it's very fantasy, but in a totally different way. There's no elves, there's no dwarves, there's no there's not everything that you expect, but there is the same ideas in the way that there are races and that there are kings and there's vassals and people and there's conspiracies, there's all that, you know what I mean? And so in this story, we follow a king who's been killed, and he set up this election thing that's been kind of erupted out of his murder, and now the king says that whoever gets the most followers, like in an election, will then become eligible to be the new king. They'll be king. Whoever gets the most votes becomes king. In this story, we are doing all the things that we normally do in a fantasy. We fight stuff. And by the way, guys, this is a turn-based RPG, so we're clicking attack, clicking magic, clicking things, and not mostly, because I say it is a turn-based RPG, but there are action elements. However, the best part about this story, which is what we're trying to talk about here, is that everything is intermingled. Like the gameplay and the story and the world building work seamlessly. Like the mechanics of the game equal in perfect measure to like how the story is told and why it's being there. It reminds me very much of Miyazaki's approach with Dark Souls and Elden Ring. It's very much that, where you're like, oh, that's why I respawn all the time, or whatever. So in this world, characters show the virtues, the big heroic virtues of the past heroes, and that's what gives you your powers. Like, they even call them archetypes. The whole point is that, oh, you're a big strong dude and you're gonna defend the defenseless and whatever. Oh, you're showing the archetype of the warrior, and so now you get to control that archetype and manipulate it, and eventually you get to kind of train any of your characters in those archetypes that you've found. And so the villain of the story, I think, is a big part of why this game works, is because the villain is not necessarily pure evil. He's the best example of a villain that is not pure evil, like not some god from hell and just like that's just what he does all the time is murder. No, he's just kind of a guy that's taken things to the extreme, almost like Rorschach in Watchmen. He's just like fundamentalist. He's a fundamentalist, and he freaking kind of stand on this hill where his ideology is a must. There's no going back. There's no like, he's not going to have a world any other way. And in perfect story fashion, he's in some ways a mirror image of the main character. There's no spoilers there. Most stories do that, and this one does it really well because there's an ideology at the base of each, the main character and the villain, and that ideology is really what's at play. They're fighting each other and they're fighting villain as like monsters and stuff, but that's just like means to an end, the end of like which ideology will win out in the end, which one is really right. And the cool part about this story is that the characters around you really all have different like viewpoints on it. Like they'll openly say like, oh dude, I don't really know about this, like I kind of agree with the dude, you know. And maybe your other party member will be like, oh hell no, you know, like there's no way we're doing this. And they serve as all your, what's cool about it is they serve as all of your different divisions in your own mind. Like we're all not one personality, we all have these different type of inclinations, and your party members are another sect of them. And at the same time, they're also a different race in this story, where like in Lord of the Rings it would be a dwarf and an elf. They have different names. I'm not going to go into it, but each character is a different race that you're accumulating, and it's really cool to see everyone kind of have their own background and kind of get along and not get along and agree and disagree in different ways. Really cool. I think this story, as much it is classic and as much as it is like have these frameworks that go back many years, probably all the way back to like Lord of the Rings and stuff, it seems fresh as hell, and I really love it. As another small disclaimer, I actually have not beat the game. I'm fighting the end right now, but I can see much of where it's going, and maybe in some weird way the story doesn't really complete itself the way I assume it will from where it's on. But even if it doesn't, I think this still deserves Game of the Year. I'm hearing you, game. The Game Awards is coming. I hear you, dude. Where's Jeff?
I tried looking you up, and nothing. It's like you don't even exist.
I guess I'm just your fantasy.
And last up is a movie that I really didn't expect to be one of the best movies that I've seen this year. And again, this is not a movie that released this year. I think it released last year, but it's called Hitman. It's a movie that's kind of a romantic comedy in a lot of ways, but it's very much a philosophically based kind of story. And because of that reason, it mixes like this really approachable rom-com thing with something that's really much deeper, and it's just like very deceivingly deep as far as like its themes and the visuals as well. Just like the characters are like what you think, they're pretty people, and it has a lot to do with why there's a lot of appeal with this movie, but at the same time it has a lot going for it that's really underneath the hood. So Hitman, this movie's based on like an actual dude who would help out the cops, and he would pretend to be a hitman. He would play a hitman, so to speak, to get criminals to incriminate themselves. And the thing is, at some point he kind of gets locked into being this persona. Each time he is a new hitman, he kind of changes it up. Throughout this whole thing, he's teaching students about like the ego and the id and like the unconscious, and like what really is you, what's the self, and like what really makes us tick, and like what makes us one thing versus another, and can you even like change that? So since the main character is like this teacher, it really grounds, hit the mic, take two. Since the main character is a teacher, and he's helping the cops, it's a great place to have all these foundations and that they can bounce off of. Like he'll do something almost like out in the world, like it's like The Wire, like there's those scenes where they go out and do the missions, and they're like getting the people to incriminate themselves and like getting drug dealers. And then there's the scenes where they're in the meeting room and they're like trying to figure it out, fighting with each other. And this is kind of how it feels. It's like there's parts of it where he's out doing these, persona hitman thing, and then he's back at the school talking about it to the kids. And as the audience, you start feeling like, you're right, man, I don't even know like what feelings that you have in your head are you. Which ones are you? Which ones are a stretch? And can you change any of that? Is it like just kind of born into you? So there's a lot of that thinking, and it really just makes you ask, is your ego or whatever, is it malleable? Or what you are something that can change? And it's dramatized so well. Like each scene is kind of got this thing where the main character is being this fake guy and knowing he's being fake, and he at the same time feels bad. You see him in the courtroom in a lot of cases where these guys are being put away because he was so good at changing and lying and tricking. And you can tell there's like a bad feeling that comes along with it. I think the big takeaway here, the reason why I really like this story, is that all the script is well written with the themes in mind. Like everything that is dramatized, all the concepts that are taught in the school, each time they're dramatized in the action and the plotty bits of the story, it's really done well. For example, like the whole point of the story is that he connects with one of the characters, a female. Like he seems like a lonely guy in his own personal life, but now he meets a girl, but as not himself, as a persona. And there's plenty of other movies that do this. However, this I think does it better because he has to know that like this is going down a dark path. This is not just a thing where it's gonna screw up the relationship if she ever finds out. This is one where like, oh, there's stakes. He probably can go to jail for this, or like at some point some bigger ramifications can go down, and they do. What later in the story things do go down where there's no going back, and that's a key, I think, part to storytelling, is that many of the stakes are unreversible. Like if you're writing a story, and I'm trying to write a couple myself, like you can easily tell if it's crappy storytelling if you have a scene that can be reversed or semi-reversed in some way. And in this story, they go full on hog wild, as they say, about going to the next level, and it just keeps amping up until you're glued to the screen. Your eyes just cannot believe that like there's a way out of this. And again, the climax of the story is directly tied to, is this persona thing like real? Is this ego he has malleable? Is it a real thing? Is it a good thing to change? Is it something that we all can do, should do, and it all ties in the end. And I think it's pretty awesome for that reason. The only thing that I didn't really think was up to top tier would be the first act, where in the first act you want to have this status quo type thing happen with your main character, where in this status quo life he's in, he needs to get out. He cannot keep living this way, and we kind of recognize in most stories that when the main character has this status quo life of just a blah type of existence, that it really urges, in like the hero's journey type of way, the main character on. And in that way, I think he just wasn't nerdy enough. He wasn't not necessarily afraid. It wasn't awkward enough. They do a little bit of that, but I think that could be pushed to the next level, and making the second and third act that much more powerful when he does kind of really embody something different. And yeah, that wraps up my stories that I really love in 2024. If you guys like this video, please like, subscribe, leave me a comment. Do you like these type of videos? Do you like these favorite videos and whatnot? Let me know what favorite stories you like from 2024. Let me know if you guys have personal preferences that are different from mine. Also, check out Good Art Tips. It's an email sign up, and I send you an email weekly to get you on the road to learning just a small tidbit of art each week. And I'm hoping that'll help a lot of people. So until next time, guys, I'll do another video soon. I'm trying to knock out a couple more. But again, until next time, be good, everybody.